Hi everyone. We are here today. This is one of the videos for the virtual interview 101 series. And so this is hosted by the Office of Research and Diversity Training, basically getting advice from students and faculty on how to do virtual interviews. And so I'm Vanessa. I'm a PhD student in the Biomedical Graduate Studies at Penn. I'm also an intern in the Office of Research and Diversity Training. And then now I'll let Maya introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Maya. I'm a third year student or PhD student also in the Biomedical Graduate Studies program and in the cell molecular biology group. Um, and I'm also an intern, so look forward to working with all of you. And today we have Dr. Kelly Jordan-Sciutto, and she's going to be answering some questions on kind of the tips to have the best virtual interview possible. And it's really awesome to have her here because she is the director of the Biomedical Graduate Studies program, an associate dean for graduate education, a chair and professor of pathology in the School of Dental Medicine, as well as a PI and mentor to many students in BGS. So thank you, Kelly, for being with us today.
It is my
Um,
pleasure.
so our first question is, how should students prepare for an interview?
So I do think that preparation for these interviews is going to be very similar to the advice I would give you if you were preparing for an in-person interview. So the place to start, without question, is knowing why you want to go to the program that you're applying to, knowing why you want a PhD, and knowing something about the people that you're going to interview with. So hopefully you're going to be talking to people who are doing research you're very excited about, and you can delve into the research that they do, you know what things they're doing in their programs, and come prepared with some knowledge about what they're doing so that you can ask questions. And I will say probably several more times in this interview, be curious, ask questions. The interview is as much for you as it is for them. And so my advice to prepare is come knowing what you want to tell them about you, right? Why do I want a PhD? Why do I want a PhD in your program? Why is it right for me? And why are the faculty that you're going to work with or the faculty that are there are people you're interested in working with? Then, with that, come with your questions that will help you know what about this program do I want to know? Can I, will they be supportive? Do they have resources in place that will support the things that I'm interested in? Can I live there? Are there activities that I find interesting? And when we don't have COVID, hopefully that will also be something you can participate in. Are there students that you will groups that you can be a part of? What are the things that matter to you for the 5 to 7 years that you'll be in graduate school that it'll be a good match for you? So you should be viewing this as an opportunity, not just to tell them about you, but to learn about the things you need to make this decision. It is an important opportunity for that. So that's the preparation phase, which is really, thinking about why you're right for this program and what do you need to know, right? Because you will be asking questions about it. You hopefully will be given a list of faculty that you're going to meet with. I strongly recommend getting to know the faculty, reading one or two of the papers if you're really interested in that faculty's work, and coming prepared to talk about that work. There is nothing more impressive than demonstrating to a faculty member that you think about their science, not just that you're interested in it, but you can think about it. So any ways in which you can ask questions about the research that they're doing, about the science in their field, it's very important to the faculty, and what they're looking for is your ability to think. So any other ways that you can come prepared to demonstrate that is really exciting. So it's good to do that on the spot. It's also easier to do it if you prepare ahead of time.
Yeah, I think students sometimes get bogged down with the idea of just, focusing on the research and don't think about what they want out of a program and like their hobbies and, like asking these important questions because at the end of the day, they should be interviewing, right, the institution as well.
Absolutely. And I think so the other piece, of course, that I didn't mention, which is really important, is be able to talk about your research
Mhm.
front, back, up, down, know the background, and maybe clearly I thought it went without saying, but it should be said. This is what they want to hear about.
Right.
And if you feel an interview is going in a direction where you haven't talked about your research, make sure you tell them about your research. Say, oh, this is all really fascinating, but I really would love to tell you about this exciting thing. Or if you're savvy enough and you can do the moment where it's like, that's really interesting. That reminds me of a time where I was doing this experiment, right? Whatever you can do to bring back and highlight your experience, your knowledge, but most importantly, convey, what you've done and how prepared that has made you to be a PhD student and to pursue the discipline that you're looking to join the program of.
Yeah. And so I have another question then. So what's your favorite interview question to ask a student?
So I don't have a favorite question. I have standard questions, and I do believe that a structured interview, and so this is a preference of mine, but I think everybody probably has their own way of handling it. So I believe a structured interview is best, and so I will tell you right up front, every student that meets with me, the first thing I will ask about is, tell me about your research experiences. And I want to hear what you've done. I want to hear, I'll ask questions, why you've done that, why that's important to you, what it means. And dig into, in general, I'll get excited because I'm a science geek at heart, which means if there's something you've done that's really exciting to me, we may completely go off topic and, down into some rabbit hole about the research. You should see that as a good sign because it means I think what you're doing is really cool. And then, but I will always try to come back to the point where I get, then why do you want a PhD, right? So even though that probably comes out in telling me about the research, I still will ask explicitly why someone wants a PhD. And that's because getting a PhD is, as you both know really well, it is a commitment. It is a commitment to a way of thinking. It is a commitment to a strong, rigorous training program that is going to take time, effort, commitment. And in many ways, it's going to break the way you think about some things and restructure it into new ways of thinking. And that's hard, right? And so I want to know that you want to do this and that you get that that's part of this process, that, you're going to do experiments. They're not going to come out the way you expect always the first time or maybe ever the first time. And that's okay because that's what's supposed to happen. And so anything that allows me to see that you get what a PhD is and you want it for the reasons that will make you successful as a PhD candidate. That's the other question. The third question I always ask is why the discipline you're going into. So I'll admit part of that is because we have 7 programs in BGS and 13 if you count all the sub-programs, it's 13 programs. So I want to make sure that students have thought about the program that they're applying to. And a little bit of this is showing that someone has prepared for the interview. Someone has thought about us seriously and they see our program as a place they would want to be, because this is a two-way match. If I make you an offer and then you come to BGS and you go, wow, there aren't any faculty here doing what I'm interested in, which I'll admit I think would be a stretch because there's just so many faculty to choose from. But still, if that were to happen, part of that is on me, because as the interviewer, I should be asking about that question and making sure that the people who we're making offers to are coming to a program that matches their interests. And then once that's all done, in general, there's always enough science to go back to and pull threads on their research interests, my research interests. I do always finally ask them if they have any questions I make sure to ask the program and the city and the institution so that that if they haven't remembered their questions, I will always go back and make sure that they have the opportunity to ask, because I do think that you come to a graduate program to learn and live. And so we have to make sure that you get the information to make both of those choices. So that's how I structure interviews. It is how I encourage people who ask me for advice how to structure them. But I think if you come prepared to answer those questions, you will be prepared for any interview. I think the other pieces of the interview, like I do love learning about the people who are applying, what's their background, what brought them here. But all of those things are valuable parts that will enrich our community. But you will come to Penn because of your science. And so I want to make sure that's, everyone is valued for their science.
Yeah, so definitely kind of hitting on the different aspects that you're looking for and that you're going to be asking about. Are there any ways that a student can really stand out? Maybe it's in their research, or maybe it's in their research, or maybe it's in, the way they convey their goals and why they want to have a PhD. But is there any way that a student can really stand out and make a good first impression in a virtual interview?
Yeah, I think So I think it's funny because I think students want to stand out, and even in their personal statements, they try to stand out. And the truth is, it isn't as much about standing out as much as it really is about standing up, right? It's about standing up to what are the needs of being a graduate student and a PhD student. So what are the things that I remember about interviews that make me say, wow, this is a student that when they come, I will be making sure I meet them on the first day so that I can convince them to rotate in my lab. And if you want to know what that question that is, it's asking me questions about my work that show that you understand what I've done. If you can come to me with an experiment that you think I should do, even if I've already thought of it, that's okay. That is cool. So you shouldn't think like, oh, well, she probably already thought of that because she's been thinking about this for 30 years. That is true, 30 years. I've been thinking about my research for 30 years. So hopefully I thought about it, right? You wouldn't respect me if I didn't. But at the same time, students are coming at things with new perspectives. I think I am always learning. And so I love when a student asks me a question, whether it's something I thought of or something I haven't, or even if it's something that may, once they had more information, may not have been a question they'd have asked. It's impressive to me that they're thinking about it. And I can see the way they're thinking by asking those questions. And so sometimes that feels like a risk to ask a question. Take that risk because it is about the curiosity that I think faculty are looking for. We want students that are going to come and not reflect back to me exactly what I think. I already know what I think. Come and tell me what I'm thinking that's wrong. Come and tell me how to make my science better, right? I'm a scientist. My job is to prove myself wrong. So I'm happy to have someone cut out the middleman and make that faster, right? So this is what I like and what stands out to me. Students who interview with me and have thought about the science, and it doesn't have to be my science. It can be their own science, right? So if you have your own research project and it's clear when, you talk about not just what your results were and what you think they mean, take them to that next big step, what they mean for your next experiments versus what do they mean for the field? What do they mean for an adjacent field, for example? All of that kind of thinking shows me that you are ready to be a scientist and be in the lab, and the energy of those other parts of the question, knowing those answers, are going to carry you through those experiments where you don't get what you expect, right? And I think you really need to have that balance. And maybe that's my, a little bit of self-reflection at you, which is it's my enthusiasm for the answers that allows me to accept the failures, right? And admittedly, I'm reframing all failure in science as being expectations, as Vanessa already knows. I work really hard to remind myself that experiments may or may not give me what I expect, but what I hope they give me is the truth. So that is the thing that I am hoping, that students are coming in and taking that risk to ask the good questions. That's what makes a student stand out to me in an interview. I will also say students who are curious about the program and ask astute questions specifically about how that dovetails with their goals is another thing that will admittedly be important to me, because it shows me how they're going to integrate into our community. It shows me how they're, are they going to work well with our Office of Research and Diversity Training Program, for example, or will they be an outstanding leader for our BGS Student Association, creating community building across our programs? Like, that's a real important part of graduate education as well. And so being a leader in science and being a leader have a lot of overlap. And so it's nice when you can develop those skills, because they will, without question, become very valuable in your career as a scientist. So I think the kinds of things that will stand out are really being able to ask thoughtful scientific questions. And so if you prepare and you ahead of time, a lot of that can be planned ahead. I will tell you some other things that will sound maybe strange, but I've had students pull out a notebook and start taking notes on what I say. They always say, can I take notes? Absolutely, right? That's impressive to me because it shows that you understand and you're taking our program seriously. You're thinking about what we're saying. And I'm going to have a legitimate chance of recruiting you because you are taking thoughtful notes about whether this is the right place for you. You both interviewed, you know how much goes into this process, right? And it's weeks of travel, and it's hard to keep it all straight. Taking notes, it's what I would ask a student to do when I'm teaching them an experiment. It's kind of nice to see that on an interview. Or they'll take out a thing and say, I read these papers, and there'll be my paper all highlighted up with questions in the margins. Don't feel like you have to memorize it, right? Like, I'm okay with that. this is what I would do, right? I would have it on my computer screen because I try not to do paper anymore, but it would be there in a place where I can say, here's the questions I have for you. I really like this thing. Here's a question that I had about how you did this experiment. Maybe you can explain that to me, right? And I think at our hearts as scientists, we like to be challenged. We like to just talk about science. We want to talk about what's right and what's wrong. So these are the things that get us excited because we can just do the experiments and find the answers. So those are the things that I see as really standout qualities in a candidate. But if you can't do that, the other thing I want to just turn around and make it clear, if you haven't done that or you walk out of an interview and go, oh, I didn't make that like big question that will make them remember me forever. You don't need everyone to remember you forever. What you need them to remember is that you understood your science, you're a strong scientist, that you have passion, motivation, and curiosity. Like these are the things you want to be conveying. And if those standout moments come, it's fantastic. It's not essential, right? What's important, what they're really looking for is that you are prepared and ready to be successful in this program.
Yeah, I really appreciate one thing that or many things that you said, but one thing in particular that, you don't have to memorize and that you don't have to have all the answers. Being able to ask someone a question about their research is really cool because I know when I was interviewing, I felt like I needed to understand everything that I was reading. And if I didn't understand it, then like talking about it was going to be impossible. But being able just to ask a PI about their research is also really helpful and probably would have helped me calm down in my interview preparation quite a bit.
And I will say, like, this is a piece that we're not expecting you all to come in as PhDs already. We do hope we're going to offer you some training. And so it's okay to ask us questions. And if you can learn in the moment from asking that question, how powerful is that to have somebody watch? I mean, when you think about it, if you were thinking about who you were going to work with, wouldn't you want someone who, when you explain something to them, they get it and can then ask the next question, right? Because now you've filled in a blank that was in this long series of things, and now they get it. First of all, I'm going to say as a mentor, that's an incredibly rewarding moment. But then to have that, to demonstrate that you can do that on the spot is a really powerful thing. I will say the added component to this for the virtual environment. I know that there's lots of talk out there, and I've heard lots of things about make sure you have your rate your room thing backed up or whatever that, don't worry. In my opinion, if your program isn't taking you because you have a poster in the background that, was from your days in undergrad, and that's, because you're in undergrad, that's normal, right? So I think I believe scientists will focus on you, and that they will focus on your science. They will focus on your desire to be a PhD. I think it does make sense to have good lighting and a good connection. And the good connection is, I don't think that is and that's unfortunate because it is something that you don't have control over. And having had a storm roll through in the middle of a lecture and shut down my entire lecture, I can tell you how stressful that is on everyone's end, right? So I don't think the connection part will be held against you. It'll just simply make the process less stressful for both you and the faculty member. So if you can be in a place where the bandwidth is yours, that's the best. But it may end up being on the faculty's end as well. So I think that's the challenge. Lighting is another thing I've heard, and I'm trying to figure out why, like, personally, it won't matter to me. If you are worried about it and you think, like, I do think it's important to be able to see people's facial expressions because there is a lot of the body language will be missing. So being able to see your face, I do think is going to be important because it's going to be how the faculty member gauges your interest. And so I think that is something that if you can, these are the sort of nuancy things that I really don't think matter, but can be helpful, right? They can make this process easier and clearer for both parties. And hopefully the faculty will do the same, that they are also talking to you from a place where you can read their expression, because I think that is something, it's now what we're limited to, right? We don't have the rest of the body language. So those are the things that I think are the additional challenges in this format. That and the 3-second delay that occasionally happens for inexplicable reasons. And I think, in my opinion, I would just call that out. I have a 3-second delay and between your words and when I hear them, just so you know, right? I mean, just let them know. I mean, I think everybody accepts that this is an awkward environment to have an interview, and we'll get through it. On the other side of things, the truth is we've been doing this for our international candidates since Skype was first invited. So faculty will not be completely new to this. In fact, one of my students in my lab, I interviewed her through this very same mechanism, 7 years ago, now something 6, 7 years ago. So it works, and it's a absolutely fine format. And I don't believe it's going to affect the interview process. I think what I am most hopeful that we can convey is the strength of our programs in this virtual format. And so I think this is why asking the questions of the faculty to make sure the program is right for you, and then also asking students and program coordinators, that's going to be an important part of this process, because I think the decision making is going to be harder without being able to visit the campus.
Yeah, I remember 6 years ago also doing virtual interviews through Skype, and that wasn't even a thing. So I didn't even know how to set up Skype, and I remember being so anxious about the Wi-Fi and just like the home environment. So I actually ended up booking a conference room at my university to make sure, to try to limit as many external things as possible. But that was great advice, Kelly.
I also had virtual interviews. I did a Skype interview and a phone interview. And you're right, like not being able to see people's facial expressions makes it really difficult to kind of gauge how things are going and, what they really think of what you just said. Like I know that phone interview was very difficult for me. So I can definitely attest to that.
Before Skype, we did phone interviews for our international students. So yeah, it was, we have been doing these various things for a long time, but and so I feel like that, like I said, I don't think it will affect our ability to interview. I am more concerned about giving students the ability to determine whether our place is the right place for them, and I want to make sure that students are asking questions when they interview to get a sense of our program, get a sense of our culture, get a sense of our city and our university, because I think this is the place where that making those really hard decisions, I want to make sure they have the information that shows them what I think is the best program on the planet.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for all of the great advice. Definitely, it's invaluable. I think students will watch this video series and, getting the student perspective as well as the faculty perspective. There's a lot of things that you said that I know that students in the student interviews, they've also mirrored, which is really, I think, perfect, that we didn't plan at all. So it just ends up working out that way. But yeah, thank you so much, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank both of you for all you're doing to pull this together. And I'm so grateful to be working with both of you.